Karen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. I am so happy to be talking to you today. I just have to say, you're one of my favorite people. So I'm
This is
glad to be here.
You're one of my favorite people, and this conversation is years in the making. I mean, this should have happened 2 years ago, but I'm glad that we're doing it now because of what you're working on, and we'll get to that. And the fact that I am finally writing a book, and we'll get to that nightmare.
Woohoo!
And so all these exciting things, but you're really get the damn book done lady who, have helped so many people get their book done. And you also work with a phenomenal publishing company. But why don't we take a second and you can introduce yourself to the audience of who is Karen today, and then we'll break down how you got there.
Yeah, today. Wow. I am associate publisher for Morgan James Publishing, which is we're a publisher that tends to lean towards the entrepreneurial side because that's where our roots are. We love marketing and really using books, the power of a book to get your message out there. So I do that, and then I am a strategic book coach. So I help people figure out what their book is and how to do it, how to get it done. Getting the book done is half the battle, and then the other half of the battle is getting the book out there and letting people know about it. So I just live in the book world. I read a lot. I love books, but I love what a book can do if you do it strategically.
Right. And it's funny because you and I have had one conversation about my book. It was like 45 minutes long, and it completely changed my whole entire approach and what I was trying to do with it. But it's interesting because I'm more excited about it now. So that just the power of taking your knowledge and the things that you've learned over the years, just in one conversation, has completely changed my trajectory with writing the book, which is exciting, which we didn't even talk about that before I record. So that's where I'm at now, which is
Yay.
cool. But
I love that.
yeah, of course. So I'm excited about that. But where did your love of books begin? Like, how did you even get into this profession? Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah. Like when I was a little kid, I didn't grow up going, I want to be an author, ghostwriter, publisher. That was not my dream. But I will say as a kid, I was a reader. I loved books, and I'm a little bit older than you. And in those days, I mean, we, Nancy Drew, like the mysteries, the books, I loved to read. I didn't love to read nonfiction because that felt like a school.
Yeah.
But I also loved learning. And so books were important to me. I have a bit of an odd background. And so my first career, I was a marriage and family therapist and had a private practice for about 10 years.
I don't know if I knew that.
No, really?
Yeah, I don't think I did. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was an MFT before they actually were even had MFTs. And my whole education, clinical training, post-clinical training, like all the things that I did was around being a strategic family therapist, marriage and family therapist. And so that's what I did. And I got trained with one of the best out there. His name was Jay Haley. And it was very strategic and very problem solving. So you helped a couple or a family get from point A to point B. And it was about helping people communicate better and overcoming resistance to change, and really that kind of post-change resistance that people have. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. So it was very strategic, and you sort of stepped outside of the system and looked, and you could help people make decisions and make changes, based on what was going on. So in '89, were you even born then, Justin?
I was 5 years old.
Okay, thank you. So in '89, a friend told us about a marketing training that was happening in LA that my husband wanted to take. And it was with a man named Jay Abraham. And it was on teaching direct response marketing. Mm. And so it was very expensive. Like very expensive. And so in my shy retiring way, I said to Steve, love that you're going, great idea to do this, but you're not going without me. And so I went with him and realized that direct response marketing was really similar to sort of the strategic family therapy that I had been trained in. It was a different world. It was a business world. It was a marketing world versus looking at a therapeutic milieu. That is what I had been working in. But what happened is that in those days, people were doing direct mail. And so you had to communicate really well because it was really expensive.
Mhm.
So, if you were sending out a direct piece, it could be 50 cents or $1 per letter. And so you had to know what you were doing. So what I ended up doing is I ended up getting involved with some really incredible marketers and direct response copywriters and got into the copywriting world. And I did a lot of editing. And I know this is going to sound a little weird, but I think it was because when I was reading copy, I could hear it. Like I have this ability to hear how it's connecting.
Sure.
And I could hear where people were making communication errors, and I could hear where they were making assumptions. And I could hear in their marketing materials where people would stop reading, or people would go, that doesn't make sense. And then they'd stop reading, or it wasn't as compelling, or all of those things.
Sure.
So I ended up working with some of the great A-list copywriters out there, which was really fun. I loved that. And then I had a friend who was in the book publishing business, and he was like, well, you want to help somebody write a book? And I was like, well, sure, why not? So I ended up co-authoring a couple books for people. And then I ended up self-publishing my first book, which was interesting because I think it's true now as much as it is then. If you self-publish a book, most people focus on self, like they get all the control.
Yeah.
But the bad news is they got to learn to be a publisher.
Sure.
So there are a lot of people, and that's kind of what Morgan James does. There are a lot of people out there that have great messages, want to do a book, but they don't want to learn to be a publisher. They don't want to learn all the things that you have to go into to get your book out there and to get the distribution, the production and distribution. So I had to learn all that when I self-published my first book. And then I got picked up by a national house. And so then I flipped to the other side because it was the same book, but then I did the whole dog and pony show as an author and did all the book tours and the book signings. And yes, I too had a book signing where nobody showed up. They did a promotion on TV and they didn't give the address of the place. So there I am sitting with a pile of books.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Balanced my checkbook during that hour. So every author has some kind of story of, whoops, that didn't work well.
That's
but
such
anyway,
a nerve-wracking thing to think about, like to go have your
Oh,
book
it
signing
is.
and have nobody to show up. Like that's in
Yeah.
my mind. Like
it happens.
But the reoccurring dream that I have right before any of the events that I've thrown is that nobody shows up and
Yeah,
that I'm standing
sure.
at the registration table. So that's a nightmare of mine for
Yeah.
sure.
So, you do survive these things.
Yeah.
And most people that I know have had some story like that of something that happens. But anyway, and then I went to work for a book publisher. So I went on the other side. I went on the publishing part, and I worked for a book publisher for, 8 or 9 years. And loved that, but then saw the other side, saw what the publisher was doing and how that worked from a traditional publishing perspective.
Sure.
And I really loved that. That was fun. And then I took about probably 7 or 8 years off and did family caregiving. And, sometimes it just happens. So we in a series of years, we lost my mom and Steve's sister and Steve's brother. And,
Wow.
Somebody just has to do it. So I ended up doing some caregiving and a lot of caregiving. And then I got to this, so I guess this is probably now 7 or 8 years ago, but I was like, well, I don't kind of know what to do with myself. And Brian Kurtz, do you know Brian Kurtz? He's such a good man. I'll introduce you to Brian Kurtz, but
Okay.
he did a conference called Titans of Direct Response, and he does Titans marketing. And he was with a organization called Boardroom out of Connecticut. And I think they did like, $100 million or, pennies. Yeah. I mean, and Brian's out on his own now, but Marty Edelstein, who had run Boardroom, passed away, and he did this tribute conference, and all of my great direct response marketing, copywriting friends were there. Dan Kennedy was there. Jay Abraham was there. Kim MacArthur was there. Like David Deutsch, Parasite Prophecy, like all of these great folks were there. And I was just like, it's like a high school reunion.
Now, for perspective, what year is this now? Because it's not 1989 anymore.
2015.
Okay, so not that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. And so I talked to a girlfriend who's an A-list copywriter, and she said, and I remember these words because she said to me, Karen, you know better than most. Life is short. Get your ass up there.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. So I went up feeling very awkward because I wasn't working, I wasn't doing anything. But I really wanted to see my old friends. And when I walked in, I met Brian Kurtz, and the first person that I met, he said, oh, you two need to know each other. And it was Ryan Levesque. And so Ryan Levesque is a marketer, and he was looking to do a book. And then I ended up, short story, I ended up ghostwriting the book Ask for Ryan. And part of it is that I'm a marketer and I'm a writer. And so I knew what he was trying to communicate in terms of his position was that basically you can ask the market what they want, that people forget to ask the market what they want. So I loved his idea. So I helped him with that book and got done with that book and swore I was never, ever, ever, ever touching another book as long as I lived. Like, I'm done with books. And God laughed.
And you're like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. And so then I met David Hancock, who's the founder of Morgan James. And he was like, well, why don't you come work for me? And I was like, nah, I don't think so. And truth be told, I didn't sleep for 2 nights because I kept thinking about it. Yeah. And so that Monday morning I called him and said, I'm in. I want to do this. Because one of the things that I loved about, and kind of I know this is a bit of a side story, but I had trained with Jay Abraham as a direct response marketer. And if you don't know Jay Abraham, you need to find out.
You're living under a rock if you don't know Jay Abraham.
Because he's amazing. And I did his protege program. But David had trained with Jay Conrad Levinson, who did all the guerrilla marketing books. And he and Jay were really good friends. So we both had this marketing perspective. And my sense, the traditional publishers that at the time, the one I was working with was pretty marketing savvy, but most traditional publishers weren't. Sure. And a lot of people who are writing books and trying to get their message out are really good at communicating their message, but they don't know how to put that into a book. And then they don't know how to get that book out there and then leverage that book.
Yeah. And I think that's the key that most people miss, right? Like, especially in the self-publishing world, they write this book and it could be a phenomenal book, but they don't know how to leverage it to benefit them. Because guess what? As you're listening to this as a young entrepreneur or even a seasoned entrepreneur, you're not going to get rich off of a book. Very rarely do you do that. Right?
So the way I say it is that that typically you don't make money from a book, you make money off of a book.
Right.
And then the marketing component is a publisher can get it on a bookshelf, but the author always has to get it off the bookshelf. And by that, I mean, we can do production and distribution and get your book in a bazillion places. But unless you have somebody walking in that door going or clicking on that site going, I want this book, I've heard about this book, then your book just sits there. And the dirty little secret in the publishing business that's really hard for publishers is if a book doesn't sell, bookstores can return it. And so it's an old concept and the genie's never gone back in the bottle. Where I think I heard, I don't know if this is true folklore, that it happened in the Depression. They said, oh, well, we can't afford to buy books because we don't know if people are going to buy them. They're like, oh, take them. And then if that doesn't work, you can return them. And that broken model hasn't ever been changed. So if a book sits there, bookstores return it.
Yeah.
And then
that's definitely a broken model because like you mentioned, like it's up to the author to sell the book. When a bookstore is able to return the book, there's no skin in the game. They don't have to say, okay, I'm going to push this because I have to make my money back or whatever the case may be. So I'm sure people are listening going, okay, Karen, I get it. Like the author has to sell the book. What are some things they can do to say they already have a book out, right? Like what can they do to get that book sold? Are there tactics, tricks? What do you see people doing?
Sure. So the short answer is yes. And the way I like to look at it is people go, well, they're kind of 2 ways. And this is a little secret that I go into in another opportunity, but they're really basically 2 ways to relaunch a book. One is to create a time to do a relaunch. And you can do it. You can create a relaunch. Like there's no relaunch police. And so you can find a day or an event or something that you drive and you want to concentrate your efforts to relaunch that book. And so that's really a specific opportunity, and there are ways to do that. The other thing is to remember that you're basically relaunching your book every day. Like you have to be on it. And this is an old this is an old marketing issue, is that you get tired of your marketing message before your audience does.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true.
And so you go, oh, this is boring, or this is stale, or this is old, or whatever. But honestly, one of the things that Jay Abraham taught a bazillion years ago is, he called it a moving parade. And that moving parade is that the world is going by, and there's, if you're taking a slice at that moment, you hit that slice, but there's somebody right behind them, coming along. And so that may be your next person. So in terms of looking at your book, you're always looking as, how is my message relevant to what's going on in the world?
Yeah.
And so if people are all, if there's no connection, and I guess that would be my big, the biggest thing that I would say is, people are looking for connection. Like, how does your message connect what's going on in my life? And if you can put that connection together, then people go, oh, great. And so part of what happens is, and I just had a conversation with another publisher yesterday that we were talking about the future of publishing. And one of the things that we talked about is that no matter what, the best form of promotion is word of mouth. Like, you create raving fans that love what you do, and they tell other people. And kind of the way it plays out, that people don't even I don't think they're consciously aware, but word of mouth happens through reviews. So it's, when you look at reviews for your book, I don't know about you, but if I go to buy something, I look at the reviews. 100%. I look at how many stars.
Especially on Amazon.
And yeah, especially on Amazon, and I could talk for hours on Amazon. But when you look at reviews, I'll make buying decisions depending on what people say. But, one of the things that I see people, when they're first launching their books, a mistake that I see them make is they really want all 5-star reviews. Like, they want the world to know that they've got an amazing, awesome book out there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Be grateful when that 1-star review comes in. Be grateful, because what happens is, you really want the majority of them to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you want them going down that way. So the people will immediately look at it and go, oh, the majority of people like this book.
Sure.
But if you have all 5 stars, they think that you just got your mother and your 3 cousins to review your book, and they said they loved it.
It's so funny. There's so many similarities in a book launch / relaunch and a podcast launch / relaunch, right? Like, everything you're saying this is what I teach my clients. Like, it's literally the same thing. And I've walked countless people through relaunches, and it wasn't about like, hey, your content's bad. It's, hey, you did this the wrong way, so let's kind of reorganize and relaunch. And then the idea of continuously relaunching or continuously promoting in a certain way, right? Like, when we talk about that by episode, like, every single episode is the next opportunity to promote, to push, and why is it relevant to today? There's so many similarities in there. Now, I want to point out something here. There've been a number of guests on my show that you've been linked to their book. Like, there's like a secret sauce to you and what you write, and somehow these people end up on my show, whether it be, I don't even know if I can mention, so I won't, but I will mention this one. You said you could talk about Amazon forever. You co-authored the Bezos letters with your husband.
I did.
And he was on the show, and we talked about that. So that was that reference right there, I imagine, unless you were talking about on the publishing side, because that's where the self-publishing comes in a lot of the times.
Yes, it does. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I want people to get their messages out. If people want to self-publish, and I did it. I cut my eye teeth in self-publishing, and I'd rather a person get their book out there than not get their book out there. Right. But what I also say is that Amazon has lowered the bar, so anyone can write a book. That's the good news. Anybody can write a book. Yeah. The bad news is Amazon has lowered the bar, and anybody can write a book. Yeah. And so there's a lot of crap out there. And so, like anything, whether it's a podcast or a book or whatever, you have to have a really good quality message. You have to do it well. You have to craft it well, because the cream's going to rise to the top. And people's radar's not the right word. People's antenna. You know what I'm trying to be? Their sense of, is this, just regurgitated crap? Like, that meter's pretty sensitive these days. Sure. But if you have a good book, message, podcast, people will go, oh, that's a perspective I didn't have before. And that helps me to learn, grow, that's going to help me. And so, I would say, one of the things that I absolutely hate is the term that people use when they say a book is a big business card. It's just a big business card because people won't throw it away. You write a book and they go, oh, books have value. So they stick it on the shelf. And the thing that makes me crazy about that is if you say that a business card is about you, a book should be about them. Like,
Yeah.
what are they going to get out of it? And so will people have a higher perceived value of a book? Absolutely. But it's got to be more than just, oh, this is my calling card, and I'm going to talk about me and my life. That's a memoir, and those are hard sells, but that's a whole different subject. But
look,
that's to say,
I love memoirs. I've realized this recently. This is my preferred reading, like biographies, memoirs, stuff like that. And so during 75 Hard, we have to read 10 pages a day. So we have family reading time after dinner every single night with the kids.
Love that.
And me. It's great. And I first read Will Smith's book, which was phenomenal. And now I'm reading Cal Penn's book. Now I'll say this. I really preferred Will Smith's book because he does a very, very good job at telling his story, but then translating into life lessons for you. Whereas Cal Penn, he's not quite doing that. Obviously, very, very interesting. And maybe it's because I can't relate because I'm not of Indian descent. But like, it's very much, here's my story kind of deal. So I think there's a power in the understanding of like, yes, you can put your personal story in there, but what's it mean to the person reading the book?
Well, yeah, I go back to connection. It's like, how are people connecting? Like, what's their takeaway? And I really, that's one of the things that's important to me, just in helping authors, is to have them begin with the end in mind. What do they want? I've said this before. What do you want them to feel at the end of your book? And what do you want them to do at the end of your book? And if you don't know those things, then it's like, going, oh, I'm going to go for a ride, but I don't know where I'm going. Well, like, it's great, might be scenic and, use gas, but you don't get anywhere. And so I really think it's super, super important for folks to understand when they're setting out to do their book, what's their end game? What do they want to have happen?
Yeah. And really, like you said, I love the perspective of what do you want them to feel? And then what do you want them to do? And I think that if you're able to hit those two things, I mean, whoever your prospective audience is, whether it's, 300 people or 3 million people, that's so powerful because it's life-changing, right? And that's really, in my opinion, that's the idea of a book.
Sure. And that's why, for me, every book needs to have some kind of call to action at the end. What do you want them to do next? What are you going to offer them to connect with you? What's going to compel them to hand over their email address and go, I want to build a relationship with you. I want to know more about you. I want you to keep me informed on what's going on with you, because what you've added to my life has such value. I want more. So that's always what you want them to do, is you want them to have more, to get more. And then you offer them more. And so if you end a book with the end and there's no what's next, then I feel like you're missing an opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And so obviously you mentioned all these different things, right? Self-publishing, publish it through a publisher. You talk about writing it yourself, ghostwriting, doing all these things, getting a coach. How does somebody know what's right for them? Is it a financial decision?
I would say, well, yes, because the reality is it's not cheap to do a book. Yeah. I mean, you have to invest in a book. I mean, if you go, I just have to sit down and write my book and then I can launch it and it'll make me $1 zillion. Typically doesn't happen that way. It's like anything. You have to, you invest the time, but you have to invest in, getting that book done, however you're going to get it done. But I know this sounds crazy, but I said to somebody the other day, when the book is ready, the author will come. Mm-hmm. Like actually, and I'll use Steve an example with the Bezos letters. That book started out to be a book on risk, and it was called The Risk Dilemma. How do you know if you're taking too much risk or not enough? And I love this man. We've been married longer than you've been alive, and it was the world's most boring book. It was just awful. And I was like, honey, and I was trying to leave him alone and let him do it. He was like, I want a book, because he had hit a glass ceiling. He wanted to do something, he felt like he needed a book. A lot of people do. And oh my gosh, it was just horrible. Like it was just so bad. And it was Steve's a 5 on the Enneagram, and so he's all about information, lots of information, but there weren't any stories in it. It had no heart, it had no passion. And so he came home one day and he said, oh, I was doing a research for the book and I came across these letters that Jeff Bezos have written to shareholders. Now, most people haven't read shareholder letters because they're often kind of boring themselves.
I don't think I would sign up for that.
Yeah.
I'm not a 5. I'm definitely not a 5.
Bezos is a pretty good writer. But Steve, when I did an analysis of the letters, I kind of went through and reviewed them, and I kind of feel like he lays out how he grew Amazon. And so he said, I think I'm going to create a white paper and then give it away as a lead gen. I was like, that would be no.
Yeah.
That's your book. That's your book, honey. Like if you can extrapolate. And then what he did, and I'm just being transparent here and he loves me. What he did was he did an analysis every year, 97 letter, 98 letter, 99 letter, 2000 letter, God bless him. He did this analysis and he did the summary and he was like, okay, there's the book. And I was like, no. You have to help people to I don't know, hand feed them isn't the right word, but you have to make it easy for people to understand your concepts. So I said to him, can you extrapolate principles that people can use? And he said, he looked at me, he's like, that's not the way I was working on the book. And I was like, I know, I'm suggesting you change. And he said, okay. And so he did. And he pulled out these 14 principles that he believes, coming from what Bezos said, helped grow Amazon. Well, then now it's sort of like, okay, now you've got a book that people can apply the principles to what they're doing. He did the analysis. And then the other side of that is the other thing that I think is really important is a balance between information and inspiration. So you can have lots of information, but if it's not very inspiring, people go, okay, that was a good read, and they don't do anything. But you have to have that element of inspiration where they go, oh, that makes sense. I can do that.
Sure.
And they're willing to take action. And so part of what happened in crafting that book, it went from a very informational book to a book that had stories and application and principles and all of those things. So you get to the end of the book and you go, okay, I can apply some of those things to what I'm doing and I can see my business grow. So, if you ask the question, like kind of where people are, it's about inertia, I think. You just got to start moving. You got to open the page and start writing. I have ways that can help people, but the idea is if you don't begin, you won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
I know that sounds kind of trite, but
no, it's true. And obviously, it's so funny as you're talking, I'm taking mental notes on like what I need to do to move forward and the shift. And we'll talk about this after I stop recording, but the shift that I made in writing the book and the approach that I'm taking now is totally different. And I think it is more of like touching on the emotion and touching on the inspiration more than just the anecdotal. This is what I've learned. And that's where I started because I felt like that's what people wanted. And it's just not true. And now it's flowing a lot better, right? Like it's a lot easier just to get going.
Well, and that's the power of story. A story helps people feel it. It helps people experience it. Stories are what drive the world. And so if you have lots of information, it's great. But it's we all know that we can have information and sometimes it's hard to remember, but if somebody tells a good story, you can repeat the story really easily. It makes sense to you because it's couched around story. And so I think for people who are looking like for you to, what have you learned, but then what are the stories of how you got there and the lessons you learned and whatever. Even I told you a few minutes ago about doing a book signing and I was the only one sitting there and I was doing my checkbook. Well, that's a story. And then you paints this picture. I don't want authors to have that picture for long in their head. but then they know, oh, she can relate to some of the fears that I have, just like you said. You can relate to the fears. If you don't share that, if you don't do those stories, then people don't feel like you get them. They'll go, oh, that's Justin. Like he had a really challenging, he had a really challenging, like, but this is easy for him. He makes it look so easy.
Yeah.
And then they feel like they don't connect. So I always come back to that. How can the reader, the listener, the reader feel connected to you, and how can they feel like you get them?
Yeah, no, I love that. And so you had mentioned, you have a couple tools that help people now. They're all coming out soon, because I know people are listening to this going, this is absolute gold, but I still don't know what to do. And by the way, I say that not because the information isn't great, but that's how my brain works. I'm like, okay, this is great. Now what do I do? So what's the stuff that you have coming out, and do we know where we're sending people yet? Because I know I'm going to follow up on this episode and let everybody know the second it does come out, but it's too exciting not to tell them now.
Oh, thanks, Justin. Well, I put together for, actually anybody who whether it's a first book or second book, but I put together a planner, and it's almost finished. So I'll give you the information when we get done, and you can let your listeners know then. But it's called Get the Book Done, and it is a planner. And what it does is that, you can print it out. You can, it's a little accountability document. And so for a lot of people, it's like, okay, give me something so that I can check it off that I actually did my writing today, or I got my message crafted, or whatever. But how I created it, that's a little different. I give you all the parts of the book. And so there's a template for each part of the book. So a template for the introduction, the acknowledgments, the title page, like the whole book, I give you a template there. So it's about, it's probably looking at about 40 pages right now. So it's just called Get the Book Done. And so it's a planner. And then the other thing that I created with a friend of mine, Margie Ross, she's a publisher forever. And I'll just take you back. We met 30 something years ago at that original Jay Abraham training in '89.
Wow.
And we've been friends ever since, and both been in books. And it's called Unleash the Power of Your Book. And it's for authors who've already created a book. They've published a book, whether it's self-published or traditionally publish it. And they want to know how to relaunch and leverage their book. So they may have gone, okay, my book's out there, but now maybe there were opportunities that I didn't see to leverage that book for my business. And I've included in there, I called it the leverage pyramid. And it talks about your book is your foundation. Like that's your entry of what you're doing. But then how do you leverage that book? So you have different, you can make money in different ways just from, the power of having that book out there. So it's the same thing about, you don't necessarily make money from a book, but you make money off of a book.
Yeah, and when your information is good and you launch the right way and you utilize it and leverage it the right way, it's game changing. I mean, I'll say it, I don't care. He's been on the show multiple times, Mike Kim, right? And I see how much his business has shifted for a positive, not only for his financials, but also for his lifestyle of working less and making more. And that was because of the book that you helped him with. And then Morgan James was able to publish. And so when done the right way and effectively, it can be quickly game changing, because his book didn't even come out that long ago. And I see the stuff that he's talking about now, and I'm blown away by how quickly that happened for him.
Yeah. And that book took a while. It took a while for him to get there. So that's what I'm saying. When the book is ready, the author will come, meaning it's never too late. Like it's never too late. But the only time, I guess that's not true. The only time it's too late is if you don't start. And so I would rather have somebody at least on a trajectory of starting and moving forward. That's kind of why I did the planner. If you need something, if you need just let me check off the box that these are the elements I need to have to make it happen. Because you have to start. And I love books, and I have a really low tolerance for crappy books because there are plenty out there.
Yeah.
But if you do a good book, if you offer great value, then people are going to want it. They're going to want you. They're going to want more.
Yeah. And by the way, everybody listening, we're like, oh man, I'm afraid I'm going to write a crappy book. And now imagine being friends with Karen and you being afraid you're going to write a crappy book and you have to send
Yeah.
it to her. Just understand that's where I live. That's the space that I live in.
Well, and so let me calm that a little bit, Justin. I think that it's a really simple book. To me, what makes a crappy book is if I feel like the author's all about them, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. They're not trying to help people. They're not trying to, they're just like, oh, I need a book to leverage for my business, and so I'm just going to write down what I know and call it a book and use it as a lead gen. And they don't have heart in it. They don't have passion in it. They don't have, I mean, even Steve's a 5 on an Enneagram, meaning that he's all about information. But honestly, I can't find anybody who believes his message more than he does.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for, because you can tell the good books that people resonate with and they love and they give 5-star readings are where people feel connected. They feel like you're invested in helping them get what's that? Is it the old Zig Ziglar quote that if you help enough people, you get what you want. If you help enough people get what they want, it's the same principle. So trust me, I'm not worried about you.
I love it. I love it. So I want to ask you a question that I ask every person on this show. It's a 2-part question and it's very simple. The first part is, what's your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
My definition of success for me, this is going to sound really funny, but it's having global impact, one person at a time. And to me, the best way to do that is through a book. So if like I helped Steve, and Bezos letters now in 18 countries, I think, and he just signed to do a course in Moscow for their MBA program.
Wow, that's wild.
Like to me, that's success. And so helping people, whether they're, again, 18 countries, we're in India, we're in Korea, we're in London, we're everywhere with a message that's helping people grow their businesses. I can't tell you how much that warms my heart and takes all of those hours and days and weeks and months and years. And to me, that's success. And it sounds a little cheesy, but
it's not. And obviously, obviously just with Steve's book, you both are doing that at a large scale, but then also all these other books that you've been able to touch and put your fingerprint on, and whether it be by ghostwriting or coaching or helping with Morgan James and getting the book out there, you're truly making that happen. And I always say, I have a very similar idea of success in a way, and I've done it through podcasting, but not only me, the people that I've helped podcast, the people that I've been able to interview and get their message heard and do all that stuff. And I think that's awesome. So what are 3 things you do every day to ensure that success for yourself?
I read every day. I read every day and I write every day. Like that's just part of who I am. Like can't end the day without having read and without having written. And then I would say, being perfectly vulnerable here, the thing I'm working on right now to be a success is I'm working on self-care. What that means for me in terms of taking care of me, because I will expend 110% of my energy helping somebody get what they want. But that sometimes that's taken its toll. And I think I've gotten to a point where I'm learning to see what it means to do self-care as a way to actually make that happen better, because I can make it happen. I just want to make it better for everybody, if that makes sense.
No, I love that. And you can't take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself. And that's such a huge key takeaway. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, and I know we just talked about the course and everything like that, but is there anywhere else people can go to find you, connect with you, ask you questions, any of that stuff?
Sure. You can go to strategicbookcoach.com, because that's
Easy
what
enough.
I do. Or you can go to morganjamespublishing.com, but strategicbookcoach.com is my website.
I love it. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. And since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Um, so I will have to lift it from the Bezos letters books. And that is all the successful failures. So Steve talks about, and I say Steve, we did it together, but it's the idea of successful failures, that the things that you look on in your life that you go, that was a freaking disaster. Like all the angst and all the hard stuff that you go through where you feel like you failed. You can typically look back and go, because of what I learned during that, I went in a different direction, or I did something different, or I grew from that. And it actually wasn't necessarily a failure as much as it was a successful failure. So it comes from the Apollo 13 story. If you've seen the Ron Howard movie, Apollo 13.
Great movie.
It's a great movie. It's my inspiration. It's like a go-to inspirational movie, because their mission was to land, a man on the moon, and they failed at their mission. But because of everything how they worked, they were able to get the guys back safely. And at the end of that movie, there's a quote that says, NASA calls it its most successful failure. It didn't achieve the mission, but they were successful in getting the guys back alive. And then all the things that happened because of that mission failure ended up improving things from then on. So that's kind of a weird answer, but I think it's the perspective for me. So I've had a lot of failures, and everybody does, but I think being able to look at those and see how was that a successful failure helps me reframe it and have a better perspective on looking at the things that happened, and when things happen now, to have a perspective of, okay, this may feel like a failure, but how could this be a successful failure?
I love it. Karen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your journey with my audience and myself, of course. And thank you so much for your friendship. I can't wait to hang out in Nashville in a couple weeks.
I can't wait to see you. I love you, Justin.
Exciting.
You're one of my favorite people, and I really, really, really mean that.
I love it. And then a couple weeks after that, you'll be at Growth Now Summit Live.
I know.
Which
I can't
I'm
wait.
excited about. You and Susie are coming in together, which I love, because you guys are two of my favorite people. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, friend.